There was a boy who grew up believing he was invisible, not in the superhero kind of way where you can walk through walls or sneak past enemies. No, this was the painful kind. The kind where you sit in a classroom full of 30 kids and no one turns around to talk to you. The kind where the teacher forgets your name even though it's been 3 months since school started. The kind where you raise your hand to answer a question, but somehow, the teacher's eyes just slide right past you like you're not even there. That was his life. Every single day. He lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor of an old building. The elevator never worked, so he climbed the stairs every afternoon, counting each step because it gave him something to do. 112 steps from the ground floor to his front door. He knew that number by heart. His mother worked 2 jobs. During the day, she cleaned offices in a tall building downtown. At night, she worked at a hospital, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. She left before he woke up for school, and most nights, she came home after he was already asleep. They lived like ghosts passing through the same small rooms, leaving notes for each other on the kitchen counter. Dinner is in the fridge. Don't stay up too late. I love you. He saved every single one of those notes in a shoebox under his bed. On the nights when the loneliness got too heavy, he would take them out and read them, just to remind himself that someone in this world cared whether he ate dinner or went to sleep on time. School was a different story. He was the kid who wore the same 3 shirts on rotation. Monday was the blue one, with the small hole near the collar. Wednesday was the gray one that used to belong to his cousin. Friday was the black one that had faded so much it almost looked brown. The other kids noticed. Kids always notice things like that. They didn't say anything to his face, not at first. They just looked. They whispered. They laughed behind their hands when he walked past. His shoes were the worst part. They were too big because his mother had bought them a size up so he could grow into them. But the soles were coming apart. And when it rained, water seeped in and soaked his socks. He learned to walk carefully, to avoid puddles, to sit with his feet tucked under his chair so no one would see. But the hardest thing wasn't the clothes or the shoes. It was the silence. Nobody talked to him. During group projects, he was always the last one picked. Or worse, he was the one left over that the teacher had to assign to a group. The other kids would groan when he joined them. They wouldn't even look at him during discussions. He would sit there, wanting to contribute, wanting to say something smart or helpful. But the words would get stuck somewhere between his brain and his mouth. After a while, he stopped trying. Lunch was the loneliest part of the day. The cafeteria was loud and crowded, full of kids laughing and throwing food and arguing about video games. He would get his tray and look for a place to sit, but every table seemed full. Even when there were empty seats, something about the way the other kids looked at him made it clear he wasn't welcome. So he found a spot outside, near the back door of the gymnasium. There was a small concrete ledge there, just wide enough to sit on. It was cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but it was his. Nobody bothered him there. Nobody even knew he existed. And that's where he started drawing. It began as just something to do with his hands. He had found a notebook in the lost and found box, the kind with the black and white speckled cover. Nobody claimed it for weeks, so he took it. He didn't have money for fancy art supplies, so he used whatever he could find. Pencils he picked up off classroom floors. Pens that other kids threw away because they were running out of ink. He learned to press lightly to make the ink last longer. At first, he just drew random things. A tree outside the window. The cracks in the gymnasium wall. A bird that landed on the fence one afternoon and stayed just long enough for him to capture the shape of its wings. But then something changed. One day, he looked at his mother's face while she was sleeping on the couch. She had come home late again, still wearing her work uniform. Too tired to even make it to her bedroom. The television was on, casting blue light across her features. He noticed the lines around her eyes. The way her hands were rough and dry from all the cleaning. The way she looked older than she should. He went to his room, opened his notebook, and started drawing her. It took him 3 hours. He kept erasing and starting over because he wanted to get it right. He wanted to capture not just what she looked like, but what she felt like. The tiredness, the strength, the love she carried even when she was exhausted. When he finished, he looked at the drawing and felt something he had never felt before. It was like he had taken all the things he couldn't say out loud and put them on paper. All the gratitude, all the sadness, all the pride he had in this woman who worked so hard just to keep a roof over their heads. He didn't show it to anyone. He hid the notebook under his mattress like it was a secret treasure. And in a way, it was. It was proof that he wasn't invisible. Not completely. He could create things. He could make something beautiful out of nothing but a pencil and a piece of paper. From that day on, drawing became his escape. Every night, after he finished his homework, he would sit on his bed with his notebook and draw. He taught himself by watching videos on his mother's old phone, the one with the cracked screen that she let him use when she was at work. He learned about shading and perspective and how to make things look three-dimensional. He practiced faces, hands, buildings, anything that caught his attention. Nobody at school knew about this. To them, he was still the quiet kid with the bad shoes and the second-hand clothes, the one who never spoke, the one who ate lunch alone behind the gym, but inside, something was growing. A talent that nobody recognized. A gift that was waiting for its moment to shine. He just didn't know it yet. His mother didn't know either. She was too busy working, too tired to notice the notebooks piling up under his bed. She loved him more than anything in the world, but she didn't have time to sit down and really look at what he was creating. That wasn't her fault. She was doing everything she could just to survive. So the boy kept drawing in secret. Night after night. Page after page. Getting better. With each stroke of his pencil, and somewhere deep inside, he held onto a small hope. A tiny flame that refused to go out no matter how many times the world tried to blow it away. Maybe someday, someone would see him. Maybe someday, someone would look at his drawings and understand who he really was. But for now, he was just the invisible boy. And that was the loneliest feeling in the world. For almost 2 years, the boy had been invisible. And even though it hurt, even though the loneliness ate at him every single day, there was a strange kind of safety in it. When nobody sees you, nobody can hurt you. When nobody knows you exist, nobody can tear you down. But that safety was about to disappear. It happened on a Thursday afternoon during gym class. The weather had been bad all week, so instead of going outside, the coach told everyone to play basketball in the gymnasium. The boy hated gym class more than any other subject. He wasn't athletic. He wasn't fast. He wasn't strong. And team sports meant being picked last, standing on the sidelines, watching everyone else have fun while he tried to make himself as small as possible. That day, he did what he always did. He changed into his gym clothes quickly, keeping his head down so no one would notice the holes in his sneakers. Then he sat on the bleachers near the back, hoping the coach would forget about him. And that's when it happened. There was a boy in his class who everyone looked up to. He was tall, good-looking, and had the kind of confidence that made people want to be around him. He wore brand-name shoes and had the newest phone. When he talked, people listened. When he laughed, everyone laughed with him. He was the center of every room he walked into. The invisible boy had spent 2 years staying out of his way. They had never spoken. They existed in completely different worlds. One was the sun, and the other was just a shadow. But that day, the popular boy got bored during the basketball game. He wandered off the court and started walking around the gym, looking for something to do. His eyes landed on a backpack sitting near the bleachers. It was old and worn, with a broken zipper that wouldn't close all the way. It belonged to the invisible boy. He watched in horror as the popular boy reached down and picked up the bag. He wanted to say something, to tell him to stop, but his voice wouldn't come out. It was like his throat had closed up completely. The popular boy unzipped the bag and started going through it. He pulled out a crumpled homework assignment, a half-eaten granola bar. And then, his hand found the notebook. The black and white speckled notebook that held every drawing the boy had ever made, every portrait of his mother, every sketch of the neighborhood, every imaginary world he had created to escape from his lonely reality. His heart stopped. The popular boy flipped it open and started looking through the pages. At first, his face showed confusion. Then, curiosity. And then, something the invisible boy had feared his whole life. He started laughing. It wasn't a kind laugh. It wasn't the laugh of someone who had discovered something amazing. It was the sharp, cruel laugh of someone who had found a weakness. "Hey everyone, come look at this." The basketball game stopped. Kids started walking over, forming a circle around the popular boy. He held up the notebook like it was a trophy. The quiet kid thinks he's some kind of artist. "Look at these little drawings." He flipped through the pages, showing everyone. The portraits. The sketches. The dreams that had been poured onto paper night after night in the privacy of a tiny bedroom. The laughter spread through the gym like wildfire. Kids pointed and made jokes. Someone called him a weirdo. Another kid said he should give up and get a real hobby. The words hit him like punches, each one harder than the last. But the worst part was yet to come. The popular boy walked toward the gymnasium door, which led outside to a small courtyard. It had been raining all day, and there were puddles everywhere. The invisible boy knew what was about to happen before it even did. "You want your little notebook back?" He didn't wait for an answer. He tossed the notebook outside, and it landed face down in a muddy puddle. The pages soaked up the dirty water instantly. Months of work. Hundreds of hours. Gone in a single second. The gym erupted in laughter. Even some of the kids who had never been mean to him before were laughing now. That's how it works sometimes. When the popular kid decides someone is a joke, everyone else goes along with it because they don't want to be the next target. The invisible boy didn't move. He stood there, frozen, feeling something break inside him. It wasn't just the notebook. It was something deeper. That tiny flame of hope he had been protecting for so long flickered and almost went out. The bell rang. Kids started leaving the gym, still chuckling, already moving on with their lives. To them, it was just a funny moment. Something to talk about at lunch. They would forget about it by tomorrow, but he would never forget. When everyone was gone, he walked outside and picked up his notebook from the puddle. The pages were soaked. The drawings were ruined. Ink had bled together, turning faces into smudges and buildings into blurs. He tried to separate the pages, but they tore in his hands. He stood there in the rain, holding what was left of his dreams, and for the first time in a long time, he cried. From that day on, everything changed. He was no longer invisible. Now, he was a target. Kids would mime drawing in the air when he walked down the hallway. They would leave crumpled papers on his desk with crude stick figures and notes that said, "Future Artist," with sarcastic quotation marks. The popular boy gave him a nickname that stuck. Everyone started using it. Even kids who didn't know what had happened in the gym started calling him that name because they heard others doing it. He stopped bringing his notebook to school. He stopped drawing during lunch. He stopped doing anything that might draw attention to himself. He made himself smaller and smaller, hoping that if he just disappeared enough, they would leave him alone. But they didn't. Every day brought new humiliation. Whispers in the hallway. Laughter in the cafeteria. Notes passed around class, making fun of him. He started eating lunch in the bathroom stall, just to avoid being seen. He would sit there, listening to kids come and go, waiting for the bell to ring so he could escape to his next class. His grades started slipping. Not because he wasn't smart, but because he couldn't focus. Every time he sat in class, he felt eyes on him. Every laugh he heard, even if it had nothing to do with him, made his stomach twist. He stopped raising his hand completely. He stopped participating. He became a ghost haunting his own life. His mother noticed something was wrong. He could see it in her eyes when she looked at him during their rare moments together. But she was so tired, so worn down from working double shifts, that she didn't have the energy to push. She would ask if he was okay, and he would say yes, and she would accept that answer, because believing him was easier than dealing with another problem. He didn't blame her. She had enough to worry about. At night, alone in his room, He would stare at the ruined notebook. He had tried to dry it out, but most of the drawings were destroyed beyond saving. Only a few pages in the back had survived. He looked at them sometimes, remembering what it felt like to create something beautiful. Part of him wanted to give up. Part of him wanted to throw the notebook away and never draw again. What was the point? If this is what happened when people found out about his talent, maybe it wasn't worth having. But there was another part of him. A small, stubborn part that refused to quit. Late at night, when the apartment was dark and silent, he would take out a fresh piece of paper and a pencil. And even though his hands were shaking, even though his heart was heavy, he would start to draw, not because he believed anything would change, but because it was the only thing that made him feel alive. And sometimes, that's enough to keep going. Months passed. The mockery at school continued. But something inside the boy had shifted. The cruel words still hurt. The laughter still stung. But somewhere deep down, a quiet stubbornness had taken root. It was like a seed growing in concrete. It had no business surviving, but it pushed through anyway. He stopped bringing anything personal to school. His backpack held only textbooks and homework. Nothing else. Nothing that could be taken from him. Nothing that could be used against him. He moved through the hallways like a shadow. Eyes down. Shoulders hunched. Trying to take up as little space as possible. But at home, everything was different. His room became his sanctuary. It was small. Barely big enough for a bed and a tiny desk. But it was his. The door had a lock on it, and every night after his homework was done, he would turn that lock and enter his own private world. He had saved up money from collecting bottles and cans around the neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a few things. A proper sketchbook from the dollar store. A set of pencils in different grades. A cheap sharpener. These supplies felt like treasure in his hands. He kept them hidden in a shoebox in his closet. Behind some old clothes his mother had been meaning to donate. Every night, he drew. He didn't have fancy art lessons or expensive tools. What he had was time and determination. He would sit at his desk with his mother's old phone propped against the wall, watching tutorial videos with the volume turned low so the neighbors wouldn't complain. He learned about light and shadow. He learned about proportion and anatomy. He learned how to make a flat piece of paper look like it held something three-dimensional and real. Some nights, he would draw for 4 or 5 hours straight without even realizing it. He would look up and see that it was 2 a.m, and he had school the next day. But he didn't care. Those hours felt like the only time he was truly alive. He drew everything. Faces of strangers he saw on the bus. Buildings from photographs in old magazines. His own hands in different positions. He filled one sketchbook, then another, each one better than the last, each one proof that he was improving. But the thing he drew most was his mother. He would watch her when she didn't know he was looking. The way she stirred soup on the stove on her rare nights off. The way she fell asleep on the couch with the television still on. The way she smiled when she talked about her own childhood, before life got hard. He captured all of it on paper, trying to show not just what she looked like, but who she was. Her strength, her sacrifice, her love. He never showed her these drawings. He was too afraid, too scared that she might not understand. Or worse, that she might tell him to focus on something more practical. So he kept them hidden, along with everything else. One night, feeling braver than usual, he did something new. He took a photograph of one of his best drawings and posted it online. There was a website he had found where artists shared their work. People from all over the world uploaded their creations and left comments for each other. He made an account using a fake name and a blank profile picture. Nobody would know who he was. Nobody would connect him to the quiet kid who ate lunch in bathroom stalls. He posted the drawing and closed the phone, his heart pounding. He told himself it didn't matter if anyone liked it. He told himself he was just doing it for fun. But deep down, he was terrified. What if people online laughed at him too? What if the rejection followed him even here, into this last safe space? He checked the app the next morning before school. His hands were shaking as he opened it. 3 people had left comments. The first one said his shading technique was incredible for someone self-taught. The second one asked how long he had been drawing. The third one simply wrote, "This is beautiful. Please keep creating. Far, 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 far." He read those words over and over again. This is beautiful. Please keep creating. For the first time in months, he smiled. He kept posting after that. A new drawing every week. His following grew slowly but steadily. People asked questions about his process. They requested tutorials. Some even asked if he did commissions, if they could pay him to draw something for them. He couldn't believe it. Strangers on the internet were willing to give him money for his art. He didn't take any commissions. He was too scared that if he did, somehow his real identity would come out. But knowing that people wanted to pay him was enough. It was proof that his talent was real, that the kids at school were wrong about him. School remained difficult. The popular boy and his friends hadn't forgotten about the gymnasium incident. They still made jokes. They still whispered when he walked by. But now, when the cruel words came, the boy had something to hold on to. He thought about the comments online. He thought about the people who called his work beautiful. He thought about the fact that these bullies had no idea who he really was, or what he could do. It was his secret, his armor. And it helped him survive. Then one day, something unexpected happened. The school required every student to take at least one elective class, and the boy had chosen art because it seemed like an easy grade. He figured he could coast through, keep his head down, and not draw any attention to himself. The art teacher was a woman in her 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes. She had been teaching at the school for over 20 years, and she had seen every type of student come through her classroom. The talented ones, the lazy ones, the ones who didn't care. She thought she had seen it all. But when she walked around the classroom during the first assignment, a simple still life of a bowl of fruit, she stopped at one desk and didn't move for a long time. It was his desk. While other students had produced rough, basic sketches, he had created something that looked almost like a photograph. The light reflecting off the apple, the subtle texture of the orange peel, the shadow falling across the table in exactly the right way. She didn't say anything that day. She just looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. He felt nervous, wondering if he had done something wrong. Maybe he shouldn't have tried so hard. Maybe he should have drawn something simple like everyone else. But after class, she asked him to stay behind. His stomach dropped. He prepared himself for criticism, for being told he had somehow cheated or traced the image. Instead, she sat down across from him and spoke softly. "How long have you been drawing?" He shrugged. "A few years." "Who taught you?" "Nobody. I just watch videos online." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her desk and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a flyer for a statewide art competition. Young artists from across the region could submit their work, and the winner would receive a scholarship worth $10,000. She slid the flyer across the desk toward him. "You have a gift," she said. "I've been teaching for 23 years, and I can count on one hand the number of students I've seen with natural talent like yours. Please don't waste it." He stared at the flyer, not knowing what to say. $10,000. A scholarship. It seemed impossible. Things like that didn't happen to kids like him, kids with holes in their shoes and second-hand clothes, kids who ate lunch alone and got laughed at in gym class. But she was looking at him like she believed it could happen. Like she believed in him. He took the flyer and folded it carefully into his pocket. That night, he read it 100 times. The deadline was 3 months away. The theme was open. Any medium. Any subject. Just create something that shows who you are. For the first time in a long time, he felt something that scared him. He felt hope. 3 months. That's how long he had to create something that could change his life. The flyer sat on his desk every night. A constant reminder of what was at stake. A statewide competition. A $10,000 scholarship. A chance to prove that he was more than the quiet kid who got laughed at in gym class. But what could he possibly create that would be good enough? He thought about it constantly. During class, when he should have been paying attention. During lunch, when he sat alone in his usual hiding spot. During the long bus rides home. Watching the city pass by through smudged windows, the question followed him everywhere. What should he draw? He tried different ideas. A portrait of a famous person. A fantasy landscape with dragons and castles. A detailed copy of a classical painting he admired. But nothing felt right. Everything felt forced, like he was trying to be someone he wasn't. Then one evening, walking home from the bus stop, he stopped and really looked at his neighborhood for the first time in years. It wasn't a fancy place. The sidewalks were cracked. The buildings were old, with peeling paint and rusty fire escapes. There was a corner store where the owner always gave him a free piece of candy when he was little. There was a bench where 3 elderly men sat every afternoon, playing cards and arguing about sports. There was a woman who hung her laundry on a line between 2 windows, colorful shirts and sheets flapping in the wind like flags. He had walked past these things 1,000 times without really seeing them. But now, standing there with the evening light falling across the street, he saw beauty in every detail. He saw stories in every face. He saw a world that most people ignored, just like they ignored him. And that's when he knew what he had to draw. He would create a portrait of his neighborhood. Not just the buildings, but the people. The lives that unfolded in these forgotten streets every single day. The old man who fed pigeons in the park, the mother pushing a stroller while carrying groceries, the teenagers playing basketball on a court with no nets, the invisible lives that nobody else bothered to notice. He started working that same night. The piece was ambitious, bigger than anything he had ever attempted. He taped together several large sheets of paper to create a canvas that covered almost his entire desk. He gathered every pencil and piece of charcoal he had saved up over the months, and then, with shaking hands, he made the first mark. For 3 months, that drawing consumed his life. He worked on it every single night, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning. His eyes burned from staring at the paper for so long. His fingers cramped from gripping the pencils. His back ached from hunching over his desk. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Something was pouring out of him. Something that had been building up for years. All the loneliness, all the pain, all the hope he had been too afraid to express. It all went into that drawing. He drew the cracked sidewalks with every detail, every weed growing through the concrete. He drew the corner store with its faded awning and hand-painted signs. He drew the elderly card players, capturing the wrinkles on their faces and the joy in their eyes. He drew the mother with the stroller, looking tired but determined. He drew his own building, with the broken elevator sign in the lobby and the flowers someone had planted in old coffee cans on the windowsills. And in the center of it all, he drew a figure standing alone. A boy looking out at the neighborhood, seen from behind. You couldn't see his face, but somehow, you could feel everything he was feeling. The isolation, the longing, the quiet strength. It was him. But it was also everyone who had ever felt invisible. When he finally finished, just 2 days before the deadline, he sat back and looked at what he had created. His hands were black with charcoal. His room was covered in eraser shavings. He was exhausted beyond words. But the drawing was beautiful. He called it Invisible Lives. The day of the competition arrived, and the boy almost didn't go. His mother had to work a double shift. She didn't even know about the competition. He had been too afraid to tell her. Too scared to get her hopes up in case he failed. So she left for work that morning with a quick kiss on his forehead and a reminder to eat something for lunch. He stood in his room, looking at the rolled-up drawing on his bed. Outside, it was raining. A cold, gray drizzle that seemed to match his mood. What was he thinking? How could someone like him compete against real artists? Kids with training and expensive supplies, and parents who could drive them to art classes every weekend. He was just a boy from a forgotten neighborhood, with holes in his shoes, and a drawing made from cheap pencils. He almost put the drawing back in his closet. He almost crawled into bed and gave up. But then he thought about his mother. The way she went to work every single day, no matter how tired she was. The way she never complained, never made excuses. She had taught him, without ever saying a word, that you show up. Even when it's hard, even when you're scared, you show up. So he wrapped his drawing in garbage bags to protect it from the rain. He put on his cleanest shirt and his least worn shoes. And he walked to the bus stop. It took 3 buses and almost 2 hours to reach the exhibition hall. He had to transfer twice, each time carefully protecting his drawing from getting crushed or wet. By the time he arrived, his shoes were soaked through and his hands were numb from the cold. The exhibition hall was in a wealthy part of the city, a place he had never been before. The building was huge, with tall glass windows and a marble lobby. People walked in wearing expensive clothes, carrying professional portfolios and fancy art supplies. Parents held their children's hands, pointing at signs and talking about which galleries they wanted to visit. The boy stood at the entrance, feeling completely out of place. He watched a girl about his age walk past with her family. Her artwork was mounted in a beautiful frame, protected by bubble wrap and carried by her father. Her mother was fixing her hair, telling her how proud they were, how confident they were that she would win. He looked down at his own entry. Garbage bags, tape, paper that was slightly wrinkled from the humidity. For a moment, he considered turning around and going home. Nobody would know. Nobody would care. He was invisible. Remember? He could disappear right now, and the world would keep spinning without him. But he didn't leave. He walked to the registration table, gave them his name, and submitted his piece. A woman with glasses looked at his garbage bag, rapping with a raised eyebrow. But she didn't say anything. She gave him a number and pointed him toward the exhibition room where all the entries would be displayed. He found his spot. A small corner near the back of the room. He carefully unwrapped his drawing and mounted it on the display board provided. Then he stepped back and waited. The exhibition hall filled up with people. Judges in formal clothes walked around with clipboards, making notes. Families gathered around certain pieces, taking photos and whispering praise. There was so much talent in that room, paintings in oil and acrylic, sculptures made of clay and metal, digital art printed on glossy paper. His pencil drawing looked simple in comparison, almost plain. He found a bench near the back and sat down, trying to make himself invisible again. This was a mistake. He should never have come. He should have known better than to hope, but then something strange started happening. A small group of people had gathered in the corner where his drawing was displayed. At first, he thought they were just passing by. But they weren't moving. They were standing still, staring at his piece. More people joined them, then more. The crowd grew larger, blocking his view. He stood up, heart pounding, trying to see what was happening. And then he heard something that made him freeze. Someone was crying. A woman stood in front of his drawing with tears running down her face. She wasn't sad. She was moved. She was looking at the elderly men playing cards, at the mother with the stroller, at the lonely figure in the center. And she was crying because she felt something. Other people were wiping their eyes too. Some were just standing in silence, unable to look away. And in that moment, the invisible boy realized something that changed everything. They saw it. They finally saw what he had been trying to show the world all along. The boy stood frozen at the back of the exhibition hall, watching the crowd grow larger around his drawing. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Part of him wanted to run away before anyone connected him to the piece. Part of him wanted to push through the crowd and stand next to it, to finally be seen. But he did neither. He just stood there, heart pounding, watching something impossible unfold. The judges had noticed the commotion. They walked over to the corner where his drawing hung. Their clipboards pressed against their chests. The crowd parted to let them through. The boy watched their faces as they studied his work. One of them, an older man with silver hair, leaned in close to examine the details. Another, a woman in a red blazer, stepped back to take in the whole piece. They whispered to each other, made notes, whispered again. Then they moved on to other entries. The boy's heart sank. Of course. What was he expecting? A crowd of crying strangers didn't mean anything. The judges were professionals. They were looking for technical skill, proper training, the kind of polish that came from years of expensive lessons. Not a pencil drawing made by a kid who taught himself from free videos on a cracked phone. He found a chair in the corner and sat down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping him going all day drained out of him. His wet shoes squeaked against the marble floor. His stomach growled because he hadn't eaten anything since morning. He just wanted to go home. An hour passed. Then another. The exhibition hall buzzed with conversation and movement. Families took photos. Artists networked with gallery owners. Somewhere, a woman laughed loudly at a joke he couldn't hear. He was invisible again, just like always. Then a voice came over the loudspeaker, asking everyone to gather in the main hall for the awards ceremony. The boy almost didn't go. What was the point? But something made him stand up anyway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that stubborn little flame inside him that refused to die no matter how many times the world tried to blow it out. He found a spot near the back of the crowd, behind a tall man in a suit who blocked most of his view. That was fine. He didn't need to see. He just needed to hear the names of the winners so he could confirm what he already knew and then leave. The announcer stepped up to the microphone. She thanked the sponsors, the judges, the families who had come to support the young artists. She talked about the importance of creativity and self-expression. The boy barely listened. He was already planning his route home, figuring out which bus he needed to catch. Then, she started announcing the winners. Third place went to a girl who had painted a stunning portrait of her grandmother. The crowd applauded. The girl walked up to receive her certificate and a small trophy, tears streaming down her face as her family cheered. Second place went to a boy who had created a sculpture of a bird in flight, made entirely from recycled materials. More applause. More tears. More proud families. The boy in the back of the room shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His wet socks squished uncomfortably in his shoes. Just announce the first place winner so I can leave, he thought. The announcer paused dramatically. And now, for our first place winner and recipient of the $10,000 scholarship. She opened an envelope and pulled out a card. This year's judges were unanimous in their decision. They described this piece as one of the most emotionally powerful works they have ever seen in this competition. The artist captured something that many of us feel but rarely see expressed with such honesty and beauty. The boy's heart started beating faster. He didn't know why. There was no reason to hope. The first place winner is, she read his name, his real name, out loud, in front of hundreds of people. The crowd erupted in applause. He didn't move. He couldn't. This had to be a mistake. They must have read the wrong name. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. But then someone touched his shoulder. He turned around and saw the art teacher from his school standing there with tears in her eyes. She had driven 2 hours to be there without telling anyone. Without telling him. That's you, she said softly. Go on. They're waiting for you. The crowd had turned around, searching for the winner. People were craning their necks, standing on tiptoes, trying to see who had created the piece that had moved so many of them to tears. The boy walked forward. The crowd parted for him. He felt every eye in the room on him. But for once, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like something else. Something warmer. He reached the stage and climbed the steps on shaking legs. The announcer handed him a trophy that felt heavy in his hands. A certificate with his name, printed in gold letters. A check for $10,000. Someone handed him a microphone and asked if he wanted to say a few words. He looked out at the crowd. At the faces of strangers who had been moved by his work. At the judges who had seen something special in a pencil drawing made by a self-taught kid from a forgotten neighborhood. At his art teacher, standing near the front, nodding at him with pride. He didn't know what to say. He had spent his whole life being silent. Words didn't come easily to him, but he tried. I made this drawing because I wanted people to see the things that usually get ignored, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The neighborhoods that nobody visits. The people that nobody notices. I know what it feels like to be invisible, and I just wanted to show that invisible people have stories too. The room was completely silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was on their feet, giving him a standing ovation. He stood there, holding his trophy, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. He felt seen. The weeks that followed changed everything. A local news station picked up the story. The headline read, "Self-taught teen artist wins state competition." They interviewed him in his neighborhood, standing on the same cracked sidewalks he had drawn. The segment went viral. People shared it thousands of times. Messages poured in from strangers all over the country, telling him how much his story inspired them. A museum in the city purchased his drawing for their permanent collection. They paid him more money than he had ever seen in his life. Gallery owners reached out, offering to display his work. Art schools sent letters inviting him to apply with full scholarships. But the moment that meant the most happened on a quiet evening at home. His mother had finally seen the news story. A co-worker at the hospital had shown her on their phone during her break. She came home that night with tears in her eyes and pulled him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to disappoint you if I failed." She pulled back and looked at him with an expression he would never forget. "You could never disappoint me," she said. "I am so proud of you. I have always been proud of you." She asked to see his other drawings. He brought out the shoeboxes from his closet, the ones filled with sketchbooks and loose papers. She sat on his bed and went through every single one, studying each piece like it was a masterpiece. When she got to the portraits of herself, the ones he had drawn while she slept on the couch after her double shifts, she couldn't stop crying. "You saw me," she whispered. "You really saw me." He nodded. "I always did." The following Monday, he went back to school. He walked through the same hallways where he had been mocked and laughed at, past the same lockers where cruel notes had been left on his door, past the gymnasium where his notebook had been thrown into a puddle. But everything was different now. Kids who had never spoken to him suddenly wanted to be his friend. Teachers who had overlooked him now smiled and congratulated him. The principal called him into her office just to shake his hand, and then he saw him. The popular boy who had started it all. The one who had found his notebook and held it up for everyone to laugh at. The one who had thrown his dreams into a muddy puddle. Their eyes met in the hallway. The popular boy looked away first. He couldn't hold the gaze. He mumbled something that might have been an apology and walked quickly in the other direction. The boy didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He didn't feel anger anymore. He didn't feel the need for revenge. He just felt peace. That night, he sat at his desk and opened a brand new sketchbook, the first of many he would fill over the years to come. He picked up a pencil and started drawing. He thought about everything he had been through. The loneliness, the mockery, the nights when he wanted to give up, the small, stubborn flame that kept burning even when everything seemed hopeless. And he realized something important. The people who laugh at your dreams are usually the ones too scared to chase their own. They mock what they don't understand because it's easier than admitting that someone else has something they don't. But the ones who keep going, the ones who create in the darkness even when nobody is watching, those are the ones who eventually change the world. He had been invisible once, but he was never going to be invisible again.